Hello, everyone. Welcome to Classic Amateurs. My name is Norman, and I'm here with Faraz.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Norman. Good friend Norman. It's good to see you again. Good to talk to you about
It's,
books.
yeah, it's classic books that we are talking about. This is our podcast about. We always read a book that we believe is a classic and try to convince the other one that it is a classic. So, what do you have for me today, Raz?
Well, I thought we go with something not polarizing at all. Something that will not trigger anyone. Something that is really kosher. No, I'm joking. Actually, no, it's actually very polarizing. Jordan Peterson, the divider of left and right. And I thought we'd talk about 12 Rules for Life, which was the book that had the most appeal, I think the most sales so far. Funny enough, I was just looking through my very, very small library and I realized I've got two of his other books. I've got Maps of Meaning, which is effectively 12 Rules for Life, but a lot lengthier, a lot more academic with a lot more Jung references. And I've got the sequel to 12 Rules for Life, which is Beyond Order, but I don't have 12 Rules for Life, which means that I must
The,
have left it somewhere.
it looks like a thick book. Is it a long book?
Yeah, I think it took me quite a while to read it. I don't have it right, but it looks pretty much like this one. So I don't know how many words are here. 25 rows, 10 words per, yeah, 250 words per page. Quite a few.
Yeah, we don't have to count it. I was just wondering, like, how many pages do you need to fit in 12 rules? Because I remember the Bible, they did 10 commandments in one single page. So, it shouldn't be longer than 2 pages, in my opinion.
Look, any
But I
good piece
guess
of strategy, if I remember, should be a one pager. If you can't synthesize your comms into one page, you failed. But
the,
no, I want to bring some context to why we're even talking about this book. Despite all the polemics behind the guy, I think it's unwarranted. I'm actually fascinated with the fact that there's so much media polarization, and especially from kind of the left side around Jordan Peterson, when I don't see that much in it, actually. He became famous for making some comments around this is probably edgy to say about trans. It was really about pronouns, legislation that was sort of enforcing pronouns, and he raised that as being an issue of free speech and compelled speech. Let's say if you're obliged to say a specific word, that shouldn't really exist in our culture. And then that triggered a lot of divide, a lot of noise. And then on the back of it, actually what emerged was some very, very good stuff that he had produced. That's when I interacted with him. I actually first noticed him in this Kathy Wood Channel 4 interview where he had, I don't know if you've seen that interview.
so you are saying,
Yeah. So what you're actually saying is, that
yeah.
women deserve to be paid less than men. and and so on. So, and it was actually, I saw it as part of a small clip from the Charisma on Command channel, who was actually using this case study to show you how do you handle conflict, how do you handle some straw manning your arguments and twisting them. And I thought it was very compelling. So I became really fascinated with the guy. And then I, just like most people, there's a huge funnel of people that interact with Jordan P. Peterson. They immediately fall into, depending on how they feel or what they read. If they read The Guardian, they get immediately turned into haters. And then there's a very decent amount of people that become more and more interested and they go down the rabbit hole. I became one of those people that I just really were interested. What does this guy have to say? And it was also in a very interesting period of my life. I was really struggling at work. I remember I had a lot of problems with my manager, and I was like, you get a point in your life where you're like looking for meaning, dissatisfied with what you're doing. Is there something more out there? And I guess what he's really good at is the synthesis. He's a great public speaker. I think better than a writer. I really enjoyed his ability to synthesize effectively. I mean, it's not his original ideas. A lot of the stuff he talks about are what we like to talk about on the pod, which is the classics, Nietzsche, Jung, the Bible, and making it kind of accessible. I really appreciated that, and I got some really good kind of, yeah, I guess good advice. Ultimately, it's a self-help book, and there's a reason
Okay,
why
so it
this.
is. So
Yeah.
you use it as a self-help book, correct?
Yeah, I did use it, and I used it a lot for and we might get into this more for the psychology aspect of it. But let me just chronologically, that when I interacted with it, I didn't really read the book until very, very, very late in the whole process because once I became interested in the way he was managing conflict, then I became more interested in his University of Toronto lectures on psychology, and then he's got a whole series on biblical on the Old Testament where he's providing this psychological explanation to some of the stories in the Old Testament, starting with the Genesis through Cain and Abel and so on. I thought, and I was always interested in that. I had purchased many books in the past on this topic, or just religious and philosophical studies. And I thought, hey, this is a guide that's providing a whole new interpretation to the Bible, and actually doesn't make it. It actually removes the religiosity out of it. It's not telling you, hey, there's a God of Jesus. It just tells you there's a reason why these narratives were built the way they are, and they relate to how we need to process reality to be able to live in it and survive and move forward. And it's related to the structure of meaning, which is universal. And I think he's really borrowing from Jung, kind of a layman's Jung. Jung had this whole, has books and books about the structure of reality, order and chaos, archetypes of personality, and he's just kind of boiling it down and throwing some anecdotes on top of it, stealing from Harry Potter, stealing from Pinocchio. It's like, oh shit, I recognize these stories. Is that the reason why I was so intrigued with them when I was a child? Oh, it makes sense because they have kind of a archetypal structure. I mean, Harry
So
Potter,
you're
which
saying you are a big Jordan B. Peterson fan.
so what I'm really saying is that I'm a big fan. I'm a fanboy. I don't agree with everything he says or the way he says things. And if you take kind of Astrid can't stand hearing him talk. He has this high pitched voice, and I think that's what leads to the polarization around it. There's something about the anxiety in his voice that for some people, maybe especially women, I find is they find triggering. And there's a reason why The Guardian has a whole editorial policy around twisting everything he says in sort of stuff that's denigratory towards him, because he does come across as arrogant and haughty, and in a way, I think he makes a lot of mistakes around that, and maybe he's changed. I mean, this was years ago. The fact that the problem is with his self-help and his advice is that he borrows from his own experience, his own pains and tragedies, and that, but he makes this mistake of saying, you have to realize that you're really stupid. So the people that are likely to be triggered, that are looking to be triggered, they're actually saying, oh, so this guy thinks really, really high of himself, and he's telling me that I'm stupid and I need to improve myself. When in fact, what he's actually saying, if you really spend some time to follow him, is that he's selling this to himself. The advice that he gives people are advice that he gives to himself. But
I believe when originally he was thinking about writing the book, he had 42 tips or rules that he created, and he created it for himself. And then he distilled them down to 12. Not sure if you know this story or not, but I
yeah,
believe
they
it's
were
still
originally
emerging
posted
as.
on Quora, and then he thought, oh, it's quite lengthy. Let me just synthesize this and bring it up a little bit. Don't want to have 10 because it's just not to the Bible. 12 is kind of a round number, pretty number.
So, which advice from this book did you take? Which advice do you think worked for you the most?
Hmm, that's a good point. Let me just check again the rules. So I have them in front of me. I can tell you ones didn't work so much. But they're kind
Yeah,
of
let's
a
go
good.
through them.
They're number one. Stand up straight with your shoulders straight. I mean, I think it's great that you have to. It's basically a reminder that everything we are is rooted in our biology, and there's some chemicals there that kind of define us, such as serotonin, and we're all part of. Don't hate the world, right? It's normal that there are hierarchies of authority and competence out there, and there's going to be alpha lobster and sigma lobster, or omega lobsters, or omicron lobsters, and that's rooted in our biology for up to 300 million years ago, and so on. In serotonin levels in lobsters, that was a good reminder. But I didn't really, the fact that you can influence your biology through, say, standing up straight and so on, and that makes you feel kind of better about yourself, didn't find that particularly helpful. But I see why that's triggering. Although it does remind me of my dad always telling me to smile because that does tend to make you happier and then more relaxed. So yeah, I
It's
guess
very triggering for me because I have back problems. I'm like, it's easy to say stand up straight. I can't even like lay down straight.
yeah. I think with number three, I'm just jumping around now. Befriend people who want the best for you. I think this is something that I learned, and I did become more conservative as I grew older. I became a bit more selective with friends. You know, I just don't feel like hanging out with everyone. Like I much prefer speaking to you 2 3 times a week than a lot of random people that we used to have at our old public speaking club, right? And I don't feel like investing in that many new relationships if I don't feel like I have something to gain out of it. Maybe that's selfish. Maybe it's a bit psychopathic, but I really want to be surrounded by people that want the best for me. And I was talking to my wife about it, and she had an incident where inexplicably a friend of hers, for some reason, was upset at something she said, never had the courage to mention what it was, and just refused to talk to her. And I always went back to this rule, even though she finds Jordan Peterson extremely triggering. And I quoted this rule saying, look, you just have to move on, right? Because you can't be surrounded with a person that is not interested in spending time with you, clearly doesn't have your interest in mind to the point where it is unable to even provide a feedback about something you said, you know, without it's kind of just as a means of respect, you know, to someone to tell you this is what I think you've done wrong. I'm uncomfortable continuing the relationship. Providing that minimum amount of empathy, best to move on. And I think that's kind of painful, but I've seen it help because then at least you focus on the relationships that do matter and they become really deep and enriching. And I've really experienced that in the last 5 years. Other things, other rules that I maybe I'm still trying to get the one that I really like. Oh yeah, this is the one that I'm really yeah. Tell me.
I really liked number 12. It's something about a cat, pet a cat. I thought that was cool.
You know, actually, I do that. I've got four cats on my street right now, and a lot of them are very very friendly. And there are days when I go to work and I'm stressed. I'm going into the transport, and I remember this rule, and I look. I have the time to pet this cat. I don't know. Maybe something will happen to me. Maybe I get fired tomorrow, or I find out about a disease of someone that I care about. I'm just going to enjoy this really small moment of me petting a cat. I have the time to pet the cat. Pet the cat,
Pet the
And
cat.
I'm
Yeah,
not a cat
that's the
person.
takeaway.
My wife's allergic to cats, but I'm going to pet the cat. And then I bring
Oh
the
no.
the hair home, and then I just throw it on the cat.
Another reason she hates Jordan Peterson.
It just leads to worse and worse outcomes for her. But this is stuff that there's a lot of it that I guess that's why guys like this, or I find that really interesting. Kind of dad advice. Maybe he's like maybe he has been mentioned as kind of the dad persona because the stuff here is really related to parenting. Set your house in order before you criticize the world. I mean, I've become a lot more domesticated and I understand how difficult it is to keep a house in order. So my ambitions about, not world domination, but definitely global impact, I've become a lot more modest. I mean, just looking after the house, engaging with neighbors, looking after my friends has become a lot more important in my life than me trying to influence the outcome in Ukraine, which I have nothing, no ability. And I'm not going to post stuff about it every day with my profile in blue and yellow, even though I feel it's a tragedy.
He will be coming to Europe, so you can influence Ukraine a little
I can only help the people around me, and I'm not going to
bit.
be this hypercritical that I can do more than that. Yeah, okay, be precise in your speech. No, the kid advice. So there are two pieces of advice on kids, and then I'll give an example where I disagree with him. But in another comment that he made outside the book, the two pieces of advice on kids that I'm trying to apply now with my 2.5-year-old. One is don't let your kids do anything that makes you dislike them. That is the single most important rule that I'm trying to do right now. I've realized, and because when they're so small, or when they're they just cry all the time, and then it's so easy to be upset at them. But they're so lovable, and if you manage to get over the fact that they're screaming all the time when they're really, really young, and you're just patient and try to understand that we're all born with an innate fear and anxiety, and we're just trying to overcome that by inhibition and growing our neurons to inhibit this primal fear that we all have, and you're just trying to be patient, then you actually are able to build up amazing relationship. Same when they're doing stuff like throwing playing with knives or jumping on the couch. They're actually just looking for attention, and they're looking to play, which is their primary state when they're two, and just not getting upset at that, and just breathing and explaining, I'm upset, I don't like that, but not having an aggressive reaction. That has been the single most valuable advice that I've had in relationship, that helped my relationship with my daughter. And it's really actually made her a lot more stable emotionally as well, because I've never or rarely overreacted or been
Is
extremely
this
angry.
is this just saying like kids do stupid shit? Don't get too upset about it.
Well, yeah, and then if they do something you dislike, tell them straight away. Don't try to spare them the feedback, because it just then you internalize that resentment, and then you immediately manifest it in other ways. You don't cook such good food, you throw stuff around, you don't play, or worse, you avoid your child because you're resentful at them, and you just spend more time at work doing podcasts or other things, right? Instead of playing and spending time. And the single most important resource that you can give your kids is not, money or anything else, but it's just attention and consciousness. I think that's the single currency that we have as human beings. Another thing that I've inferred from Jordan Peterson is that, even time is really consciousness, is attention spans, right, in our lives to a large extent. And you can even divide up your life into what are you focused on in this part of your life versus another part. So that's really, really
I,
important.
I
Hmm.
believe he talks about his daughter as well in the book.
Yeah, that's in the Pet a Cat story where you can you acknowledge, and this made me kind of stop hating people that are wealthier than me, because it's tied to the idea that everybody has like a lot of tragedy in their lives. Everybody loses people or sees someone faced with severe debilitating illness or is experiencing that themselves. And first of all, that's their baseline, no matter how kind of rich you are. Of course, it's a bit more tragic if you have less money because you're less protected. Let's say from a welfare perspective, you have less resources. But net, kind of everybody has the same problem. We're all gonna die in horrible ways, and we've spoken about the existentialists here, right, many times. So what you can do is actually, well, celebrate the things that you have, kind of great gratitude. I guess there's a lot of self-help prophesy that, but he's just using, I guess, his experience with his daughter. And funny enough, if you do show gratitude in the moments that are the worst, and you try to keep kind of faith, I don't know, I can say that, I know, polemic to say that, often maybe things do turn around a little bit, or at least you experience life with a bit more dignity, and somehow it just makes life a bit better, either for the people that are suffering around you or for yourself. So that's been good. Yeah, and then
I guess we don't have to go through every
no,
rule
that's kind of
in the
everything that I
book.
wanted to say.
I'm sure it helps a lot of people to read this book. I guess you would recommend it as well, considering you have three of his books now on your shelf.
Yeah, I've got all his books. Basically, I did buy all of them. Although I can't prove that I've actually purchased 12 Rules for Life. It's okay, we'll put like a little cover somewhere in the thumbnail.
And what do you think of his the because you said your wife is not fond of his high pitched, I guess somewhat whiny voice. I have that issue as well, so I wanted to ask you, is he keeps going on and on and on, using a lot of like technical terms, really highbrow terms that I'm sure there's a lot of research put into it, trying to express like a really deep, complex meaning. But he loses me very quickly because I don't fully understand some of these terms. It's almost like when you talk to your own colleagues about your own field and business, you find yourself using these technical terms or acronyms that have so much meaning to them. And it's fine if you do one or two, but it gets confusing and hard to follow once you load up your sentences with them. So my problem with Jordan B. Peterson is that I just can't follow him really well. I feel like you need to have like explanation of every term he's using.
Mm.
I would appreciate if you could simplify what he's saying and make it a bit more succinct, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, and I've changed my own, engagement with his content recently, and I spend a lot less time than I used to. But maybe my advice to you, I don't know where you're getting the content from, is start with the beginning. Like just go on his channel on YouTube and start going through the original lectures, like the psychology course or the biblical series, because it's really plain English and it's not, you don't get just snippets of out of context, you just get the raw inform data and you kind of understand what he's about from the ground up. And I think they're really amazing lectures. I spend a lot of my time watching lectures, and that would be one way of getting around that, the jargon, because you learn it from first principles. And then whenever you encounter kind of synopsis snippets of him, you know what he's referring to, and it comes from a broader, and because he's talking to students there, so ultimately it is starting from zero. That would be my advice. Start with the biblical series or the psychology class.
Sure. But when it
And
comes
his
to the 12
voice,
rules,
yeah, yeah, sorry.
yeah, cool. No, I just wanted to ask you, when it comes to 12 rules of life, you would recommend that even for people that hasn't engaged with Jordan Peterson before, correct?
Yeah, I think it's a great book. I did mention, some very, very useful advice that I picked up from. I think it's very easy to, like any self-help book, a lot of it is your own predisposition and how much you want to take from it, because you can read it gloss over it and realize that a lot of the stuff is kind of universal and all makes sense, but it doesn't really doesn't have much substance. So there's the risk of that, and I understand why someone would do it. For me, it was very helpful that I saw a lot of his videos and his content before reading the book. So it's the first example where actually, and we've talked about movie versus book many times, seeing his lectures first is actually more beneficial than digesting the book than the other way, unless you're like really just into
Nice.
reading and don't like watching video. So my advice, videos first, book as a
No,
simple.
I prefer watching. I definitely prefer watching over reading. Just give me a movie adaptation of a book and I'll go for it. Thanks a lot for introducing me to this book, Raz. I think we can wrap up here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Nue, I'm sorry that I'm doing this episode without my best man from the wedding. So I went to visit him a few months ago, and we started chatting. And you'd be surprised; it's kind of a cliche how guys bond over Jordan B. Peterson, but it's actually true. And it's ironic that he's not even, I don't think, intentionally targeted, males in particular, but definitely they ended up forming the majority of his audience. And we just started chatting at dinner, and we suddenly realized that we spoke about, you've seen, we had both seen the videos of the Jordan B. Peterson, and he said he was completely obsessed with the biblical series. And bear in mind, we hadn't spoken for maybe 4 years. He was the best man on my wedding. We hadn't spoken in a few years. Pandemic had passed. And then we find ourselves consuming the same content. We had both been very, very, very interested in the biblical series. And he said he wanted to join us as a guest on the pod to talk, to present himself the biblical series. And I'm sort of
Okay.
sorry that we're doing this without him, but maybe we'll get him on a follow up
No, no,
show.
please, let's invite him
Yeah,
to. Yeah,
he's
all
getting
right,
married
cool.
in July, so that'll be good.
Anyway, we will add a link to the description and to the video for anyone who would like to purchase